Minho wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished connecting the last power cable to the Council's main data hub. The massive tower hummed with energy, its crystal walls glowing blue in the artificial light of Nexus Prime's orbital station. He had been working for 12 hours straight, fixing problems that the alien engineers could not solve. This was normal for him and every other human in Council space. The work was always the same. Humans fixed things, repaired systems, and kept the galaxy running while the Council members made important decisions. Minho did not mind the work. He was good with his hands and enjoyed solving complex problems. What bothered him was how the other species looked at him. They saw humans as useful tools, nothing more. Across the station, Sora stood in the Council chamber's waiting room. She had been there for 6 hours, holding a datapad with humanity's petition for equal representation. The document contained careful arguments about human contributions to galactic society, statistics about their work, and requests for a single seat on the Council. Sora believed the request was reasonable. Humans had been part of the galactic community for 50 years, yet they had no voice in decisions that affected their lives. The chamber doors finally opened, and a tall Vorthak guard motioned for her to enter. The Council chamber was enormous, with representatives from 12 different species sitting in curved rows around a central platform. Their scales, fur, and exotic features made Sora feel small and alien, even though this was supposed to be a place for all galactic citizens. Thexmar, the Vorthak Council leader, looked down at her with yellow eyes that showed no warmth. His reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile, but it felt more like a predator showing its teeth. Behind him sat representatives from the Zelani Collective, their pale blue skin shimmering with embedded technology. The other Council members watched with varying degrees of boredom and amusement. Sora began her presentation, explaining how humans had helped build the infrastructure that connected the galaxy. She showed images of human engineers working on space stations, communication arrays, and terraforming equipment. She presented data about human innovations that had improved efficiency across Council territories. Her voice remained steady and professional, even as she noticed several Council members looking at their personal devices instead of listening. When she finished, the chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Thexamar began to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed off the crystal walls. Other Council members joined in, their various forms of laughter creating a cacophony that made Sora's cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Humans are indeed competent with their hands," Thexmar said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Your species excels at following instructions and completing assigned tasks. These are valuable qualities in workers. However, you lack the mental capacity for true governance. Political leadership requires wisdom, strategic thinking, and the ability to understand complex interspecies dynamics. These are qualities that humans simply do not possess." A Zelani representative named Veltara leaned forward, her voice carrying the artificial harmonic that her species used for formal speech. "The human petition demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of their role in galactic society. They provide manual labor and basic technical services. This contribution is appreciated, but it does not qualify them for participation in governmental decisions that affect the future of multiple star systems." Sora felt her heart sink, but she maintained her composure. "With respect, Council Leader, humans have contributed more than manual labor. We have developed new technologies, improved existing systems, and solved problems that other species could not address. Our engineers have prevented countless system failures and following repair manuals and replacing broken components does not constitute technological innovation," Thexmar interrupted. "Any sufficiently trained worker could perform these tasks. The fact that humans happen to be reliable in this capacity does not demonstrate intelligence beyond basic mechanical aptitude." The Council continued to discuss humans as if Sora was not standing there. They spoke about human limitations, their usefulness as a labor force, and their apparent inability to understand complex concepts. Each word felt like a physical blow, but Sora forced herself to listen. She needed to understand exactly how the Council viewed her species. Meanwhile, in the station's maintenance sectors, Jiwon was performing what the Council considered routine repairs on the flagship's primary systems. What they did not know was that the routine repairs involved completely redesigning the power distribution network to prevent cascading failures that would have destroyed half the ship. The original alien design had critical flaws that its creators never recognized. G1 had quietly fixed these problems without bothering to explain the complexities to his supervisors. Similar work was happening throughout Council space. Human engineers were solving problems that alien species did not even know existed. They improved efficiency, prevented disasters, and created elegant solutions to technical challenges. The aliens saw this as simple maintenance work, because the humans never made a show of their innovations. They simply did what needed to be done and submitted brief reports that mentioned repairs without explaining the sophisticated engineering involved. Back in the council chamber, the discussion was reaching its conclusion. Thexmar stood and activated a holographic display showing the new biological hierarchy decree. The document officially classified all species based on their perceived intellectual and governmental capabilities. Humans were listed as a service species with no rights to political participation, but guaranteed employment in maintenance and technical support roles. This decree reflects the natural order of galactic society, Thexmar announced. Each species contributes according to their abilities. Humans excel at practical work and should focus on these strengths rather than aspiring to roles for which they are unsuited. We offer humanity a clear choice. Accept your designated role as valued service providers, or leave council space entirely to seek opportunities elsewhere. The ultimatum hung in the air like a poison gas. Sora understood that this was not really a choice at all. The Council was telling humanity to accept second-class status or face exile from the only galactic civilization they had ever known. Either option meant abandoning the dream of equality and recognition that had motivated generations of human workers. Sora looked around the chamber one final time, meeting the eyes of council members who had already dismissed her from their thoughts. Some appeared bored, others satisfied, and a few seemed genuinely puzzled by her continued presence. None showed any sign of understanding what they had just done. "We understand," Sora said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Thank you for making your position clear." She turned and walked toward the chamber doors, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind her, the council members were already moving on to other business, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes as if nothing significant had happened. They had solved their human problem with a simple decree, and now they could focus on more important matters. As Sora left the station, she activated her personal communicator and sent a coded message to human communities throughout the galaxy. The message was brief and seemingly innocuous, but every human who received it understood its meaning. The time for hoping and waiting was over. The Council had made their choice, and now humanity would make theirs. The first sign that something had changed came 3 days after Sora's meeting with the Council. Human workers across the galaxy began behaving differently, though the change was so subtle that most aliens did not notice it immediately. They continued to perform their duties with the same efficiency and professionalism as always. But there was something new in their manner. They moved with quiet purpose, as if following a plan that no one else could see. Do-hyun sat in his office. On New Sol, one of humanity's largest colonies in Council space, the settlement sprawled across 3 continents of a terraformed world, home to 12 million humans who had built a thriving society from nothing but rock and atmosphere. He was reading reports from other human colonies, and every message told the same story. The evacuation had begun. The plan was called Operation Quiet Dawn, and it had been prepared in secret for over a decade. Human leaders had always known that this day might come, when their contributions would be dismissed and their requests for equality rejected. They had quietly prepared for the possibility of leaving Council space entirely, developing technologies and strategies that would allow them to vanish without a trace. Nyon commanded one of the evacuation fleets, a group of ships that appeared to be standard cargo vessels but carried advanced stealth systems hidden within their hulls. The technology was human-developed, based on years of studying Council sensor networks while performing routine maintenance on detection equipment. Every time humans had calibrated alien sensors, they had learned how to avoid them. The evacuation proceeded with military precision, but without any of the drama that aliens might have expected. There were no protests in the streets, no angry broadcasts, no demands for the Council to reconsider. Humans simply packed their personal belongings, completed their current work assignments, and left. They took nothing that belonged to the Council, but they also left behind nothing that might help alien species understand how human improvements had been made. On Nexus Prime, Minho finished his final shift at the data hub. He had spent the last week documenting every modification he had made to the system, but his documentation was written in technical language so complex that alien engineers would need years to understand it. The modifications themselves were elegant solutions to problems that the original designers had never anticipated. Without human maintenance, the data hub would begin experiencing cascading failures within months. Minho submitted his final report and cleaned out his workspace. His alien supervisor, a Zilani technician named Kolvar, barely looked up from his own work as Minho said goodbye. To Kolvar, this was just another human worker transferring to a different assignment. The idea that humans might actually leave Council space entirely seemed impossible. Where would they go? How would they survive without alien technology and guidance? What Kolvar did not understand was that humans had been developing their own technology for decades, often in secret. Every repair job had been a learning experience, every maintenance task an opportunity to study alien engineering and find ways to improve it. Humans had quietly become the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, but they had hidden this advancement behind a facade of simple repair work. Throughout Council space, the pattern repeated itself. Human workers completed their shifts, submitted their reports, and departed without ceremony. They left behind gleaming facilities, perfectly functioning equipment, and detailed documentation that would prove useless to the aliens who inherited it. The documentation was technically accurate but assumed knowledge that only humans possessed. The Council members were initially pleased by humanity's quiet acceptance of their new status. There had been no violent protests, no terrorist attacks, no diplomatic incidents. The humans had simply accepted reality and moved on, exactly as Thexmar had predicted they would. This seemed to confirm the Council's assessment of human psychology. They were practical workers who understood their limitations and accepted their place in the galactic hierarchy. Veltara of the Zilani Collective was among the few who found the human response puzzling. She had expected some kind of reaction to the biological hierarchy decree, even if it was just formal protests or requests for reconsideration. The complete silence from human leadership was unusual, but she convinced herself that it simply reflected their acceptance of superior alien judgment. The first indication that something was wrong came when human ships began disappearing from Council sensor networks. Initially, this was attributed to navigation errors or equipment failures. Space was vast, and ships occasionally went missing for mundane reasons. However, the disappearances followed a pattern that gradually became impossible to ignore. Human vessels were vanishing from sensors at the edge of Council space, apparently heading toward unexplored regions of the galaxy. Hyunwoo was among the last humans to leave Council space, departing on a transport that carried the final evacuation, wave from the core worlds. His job had been to monitor Council communication networks and ensure that Operation Quiet Dawn proceeded without detection. He had spent months inserting subtle software modifications into alien systems, changes that would prevent the Council from tracking human ships or understanding the scope of the evacuation until it was too late. As his ship crossed the boundary of Council space, Hyunwoo activated a program that began systematically removing all traces of human technological contributions from alien databases. The program would work slowly over the course of several months, deleting backup files and corrupting data in ways that would appear to be random system failures. By the time the Council realized what they had lost, the information would be gone forever. The human exodus was not just a physical departure, but an intellectual one as well. Decades of accumulated knowledge, thousands of small innovations, and countless elegant solutions to technical problems were being erased from Council records. The aliens would be left with the basic functionality of their original designs. But, without the improvements that had made those designs actually work in the real world, Naeon's fleet was among the last to leave, carrying refugees from the inner colonies where humans had been most deeply integrated into Council society. Her ships moved in perfect formation, their stealth systems rendering them invisible to alien sensors. The technology was so advanced that Council forces could not detect the massive fleet even when it passed within a few light hours of major installations. As the fleet entered hyperspace for the final jump to humanity's new territory, Neon broadcast a message to all human ships. Operation Quiet Dawn is complete. Welcome to the new beginning. The response was not celebration, but quiet satisfaction. Humans had accomplished something unprecedented: the complete evacuation of an entire species from galactic civilization, without anyone noticing until it was over. Behind them, Council space continued to function normally. Alien workers took over the positions that humans had vacated. Alien technicians assumed responsibility for maintaining systems that humans had built and improved. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. The equipment worked, the networks operated smoothly, and life went on as usual. But the problems began small and grew steadily worse. Communication networks experienced intermittent failures that alien technicians could not explain. Power systems developed efficiency losses that gradually accumulated over time. Life support networks showed signs of instability that seemed random but followed patterns that no one could identify. The Council's initial response was to blame the problems on human sabotage, but investigations found no evidence of deliberate damage. The systems were failing according to their original design parameters, as if the modifications that had kept them stable were somehow being undone. Alien engineers studied the human documentation, but found it impossibly complex, filled with references to theoretical concepts that no alien educational system taught. Dr. Veltara was the first to begin understanding the scope of the problem. She had been studying human work reports for months, trying to understand why their departure had coincided with so many technical difficulties. What she discovered was disturbing. Human maintenance reports were actually sophisticated technical papers describing advanced engineering solutions. The aliens had been reading them as simple repair logs because they lacked the background knowledge to understand what they were actually seeing. They were not just fixing our technology, she reported to the Council. They were completely redesigning it to work better than we ever imagined possible. Every routine repair was actually a major innovation that we failed to recognize. The revelation came too late. Humanity was gone, vanished into the vast, unexplored regions beyond Council space. They had taken with them not just their physical presence, but their accumulated knowledge, leaving behind a civilization that was slowly discovering how much it had depended on the quiet competence of the species it had dismissed as intellectually inferior. 3 months after the last human ship had vanished from Council sensors, the galaxy began to experience what officials termed technical difficulties. The problems started small and seemed unrelated: a communication relay failing here, a power distribution network experiencing efficiency losses there, life support systems requiring more frequent maintenance than their specifications indicated. Council engineers approached each problem as an isolated incident, applying standard repair procedures and expecting normal results. They did not get normal results. Mordak, the Vorthak security chief, stood in the command center of Nexus Prime's orbital defense platform, staring at displays that showed cascading system failures across 3 sectors. What had begun as minor glitches in the station's automated systems had evolved into complete breakdowns that threatened the safety of millions of inhabitants. His engineering teams had been working around the clock for weeks, but every repair seemed to create 2 new problems. "Status report," he growled at the Zalani technician monitoring the primary systems. "Sir, we have restored power to sections 7 through 12, but the gravitic stabilizers in the orbital ring are showing dangerous fluctuations. The atmospheric processors on levels 40 through 60 are operating at 60% efficiency, and the main computer core is experiencing memory corruption that we cannot identify or correct." Mordak's clawed hands gripped the railing as he watched another system indicator turn red. The defense platform had been constructed using the finest alien engineering, incorporating technologies from multiple species to create what was supposed to be an impregnable fortress. Now it was falling apart like a house built from sand. Dr. Veltara had spent the last month analyzing system failures across Council space, and the pattern she discovered was both obvious and impossible to accept. Every failing system had one thing in common: it had been maintained primarily by human workers. At first, she had assumed this was coincidence. Humans had been responsible for maintenance throughout Council space, so naturally they would be associated with any technical problems. But as she dug deeper into the data, she began to understand something terrifying. The human maintenance reports that she had been studying were not just documentation of repair work. They were detailed technical papers describing fundamental modifications to alien technology. The humans had been quietly rebuilding Council infrastructure from the ground up, creating systems that were far more advanced than anything the original designers had envisioned. Now that the humans were gone, the modifications were failing because no one else understood how they worked. In her laboratory aboard the Zilani research vessel, Veltara had constructed a scale model of a typical Council power distribution network. Using the original alien specifications, the system functioned adequately but showed the same efficiency problems that had plagued the design for centuries. When she attempted to implement the modifications described in human maintenance reports, the system's performance improved dramatically, but only if she followed the human procedures exactly. The problem was that the human procedures assumed knowledge that no alien species possessed. The modifications were based on principles that were not taught in any alien university and relied on techniques that no alien engineer had ever developed. The humans had been operating at a level of technological sophistication that the Council had never recognized because they had hidden their advances behind routine maintenance work. Veltara's most disturbing discovery came when she analyzed the timing of system failures. The breakdowns were not random. They followed a predictable pattern that suggested the human modifications had been designed with built-in obsolescence. Not sabotage exactly, but a gradual degradation that would occur if the systems were not maintained by people who understood their true complexity. Across the galaxy, similar realizations were dawning on other alien engineers. The terraforming equipment on New Ceres, a world that had been successfully converted from a dead rock to a garden paradise, was slowly losing its ability to maintain atmospheric balance. The massive machines that generated breathable air and regulated planetary climate were following their original programming, but that programming had been subtly modified by human technicians to account for variables that the original designers had never considered. Without human oversight, the terraforming systems were reverting to their baseline operation, which was inadequate for maintaining the complex atmospheric chemistry that supported advanced life. The planet's 12 billion inhabitants would not die immediately, but their world was slowly becoming less hospitable as each day passed. The Vorthak homeworld was experiencing even more dramatic problems. The planet's defense grid, which protected against asteroid impacts and solar radiation, was built around a network of orbital platforms that had been regularly maintained by human engineering teams. The platforms themselves were functioning, but the coordination between them was breaking down in ways that alien technicians could not understand or repair. The defense grid had been designed as a collection of independent systems that worked together through careful programming. What the designers had not anticipated was the need for constant micro-adjustments to account for gravitational drift, solar wind variations, and countless other factors that affected orbital mechanics. Human engineers had been making these adjustments, automatically, treating them as routine calibration work. Now, without human intervention, the platforms were slowly drifting out of alignment. The process was so gradual that it would take years to reach critical failure. But when that failure came, it would leave the Vorthak homeworld defenseless against natural disasters that had been held at bay for generations. Minho's former workplace, the Council's main data hub, was experiencing the most spectacular failure of all. The massive crystalline structure that housed the galaxy's primary information networks was consuming power at an exponential rate while producing increasingly unreliable results. The quantum computers that processed interstellar communications were generating errors faster than they could be corrected, and the backup systems were failing in sequence. What alien technicians did not understand was that Minho had been running what amounted to a completely different computer system inside the Council's hardware. He had used the existing equipment as a platform for implementing processing algorithms that were decades ahead of standard alien technology. The official specifications showed a network capable of handling normal galactic communications, but Minho's modifications had created a system that could process information loads that were theoretically impossible. The modifications were failing because they required constant adjustment by someone who understood both the underlying alien technology and the advanced human algorithms that had been layered on top of it. Without that knowledge, the system was reverting to its original capabilities, which were completely inadequate for the communication loads that the modern galaxy demanded. Emergency meetings were being called throughout Council space as the scope of the crisis became clear. Transportation networks were experiencing delays as navigation systems lost accuracy. Trade routes were being disrupted by communication failures that made interstellar commerce increasingly difficult. Scientific research was being hampered by equipment failures that alien researchers could not resolve. The Council's first instinct was to blame human sabotage, but extensive investigations found no evidence of deliberate damage. The humans had not destroyed anything. They had simply stopped maintaining systems that could not function without their expertise. It was like watching a complex machine slowly wind down after the person who understood its inner workings had walked away. Dr. Veltara presented her findings to an emergency session of the Council, her voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that indicated extreme distress among her species. "We are not dealing with sabotage or terrorism. We are experiencing the consequences of our own ignorance. For 50 years, humans have been quietly advancing our technology while we assumed they were performing simple maintenance. They created a technological foundation that our entire civilization depends upon, and we never realized it existed." Thexmar listened to her report with growing horror. The implications were staggering. If human knowledge was truly essential for maintaining galactic infrastructure, then the Council had not just lost a labor force. They had lost the technological foundation of their entire civilization. "Surely, our own engineers can reverse engineer what the humans accomplished," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Veltara's response was devastating. "Sir, we have been trying to do exactly that for 3 months. The human modifications are based on principles that we do not understand and techniques that we cannot replicate. It would be like asking a child to rebuild a starship after watching someone else operate the controls." The council chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed the magnitude of their mistake. They had dismissed humans as intellectually inferior, but it was becoming clear that the opposite was true. Humanity had been quietly operating at a level of technological advancement that made alien science look primitive by comparison. Ambassador Kexalon stood on the bridge of the Council search vessel, staring at empty space where long-range sensors indicated a human colony should have been. According to their records, New Terra had been home to 8 million humans and served as a major hub for human engineering operations throughout this sector. Now there was nothing but vacuum and the faint radiation signature of a star that seemed somehow dimmer than it should have been. "Sensor report," he commanded, his 4 arms gesturing impatiently at the detection stations. "Sir, we are detecting no artificial structures, no energy signatures, and no debris field that would indicate destruction," replied the Vorthak sensor operator. "It appears that the human settlement was completely removed without leaving any trace of its existence. This was the 15th human colony that the search fleet had investigated, and the pattern was always the same. The humans had not just evacuated their people. They had somehow erased every sign that they had ever been there. Buildings, infrastructure, even the orbital installations that had taken decades to construct had vanished completely. It was as if an entire civilization had simply decided to stop existing." Dr. Veltara studied the scan results from her position at the science station. She had volunteered to join the search mission because she understood better than anyone how much the Council needed to find humanity and convince them to return. The galaxy was dying slowly, system by system, and only human knowledge could save it. "Ambassador, I am detecting unusual gravitational anomalies in the outer system," she reported. "The readings suggest that massive objects were recently moved through this area, but our sensors cannot determine what those objects were or where they went." Kexalon felt his primary heart sink as he realized the implications. The humans had not just packed up and left. They had somehow transported entire cities, industrial complexes, and orbital facilities to unknown destinations. The level of technology required for such an operation was far beyond anything the Council possessed or even understood. Captain Zorthak, commanding the search fleet, was dealing with increasingly serious problems aboard his own ships. The vessels had been designed for long-range exploration and were normally capable of operating independently for months at a time. However, they had been maintained by human engineering teams, and those teams had apparently made modifications that were essential for extended operations. The ship's power systems were consuming fuel at rates that exceeded their design specifications, but the engines were producing less thrust than they should have. Life support systems were functioning but required constant adjustment to maintain proper atmospheric balance. Navigation computers were developing calculation errors that grew, worse with each hyperspace jump. "Status report," Zorthak demanded from his engineering chief. "Sir, we are experiencing cascade failures throughout multiple systems. Our fuel reserves will last perhaps 2 more weeks at current consumption rates, and our navigation accuracy has degraded to the point where we risk becoming lost if we attempt another long-range jump." Zorthak realized with growing horror that his search fleet was slowly breaking down in the same way that Council infrastructure was failing throughout the galaxy. The ships had been dependent on human maintenance, and without that maintenance, they were reverting to their original capabilities, which were apparently inadequate for their intended mission. Meanwhile, the search teams that had managed to reach abandoned human settlements were making disturbing discoveries. The humans had not just taken their possessions when they left, they had also removed or destroyed everything that might have helped alien species understand how human modifications worked. On the world that had once been called New Beijing, search teams found empty buildings that had been stripped down to their basic structural elements. The humans had removed not just their equipment, but also the improvements they had made to alien-designed infrastructure. Power systems had been restored to their original configurations, which were so inefficient that they could barely support basic lighting. Environmental systems had been reset to baseline operation, leaving the buildings barely habitable even for the alien species that had designed them. Most frustrating of all were the technical libraries that humans had left behind. The databases contained thousands of detailed reports describing maintenance work performed over decades, but the reports were written in scientific language so advanced that alien researchers could not understand them. It was like finding a library written in a language that used familiar words but combined them in ways that conveyed meanings beyond comprehension. Dr. Veltara spent weeks analyzing human technical documentation, trying to find patterns that might help alien engineers replicate human innovations. What she discovered was even more disturbing than she had feared. The human reports were not just maintenance logs. They were scientific papers describing breakthroughs in physics, engineering, and computer science that were decades ahead of current alien knowledge. They were not hiding their advances from us, she explained to Ambassador Kexalon during one of their daily briefings. They were documenting everything they did, in complete detail. We simply lacked the scientific background to understand what we were reading. It is as if they were speaking a language that we thought we knew, but they had expanded the vocabulary beyond our comprehension. The search mission's most significant discovery came when they located a human message beacon drifting in the outer reaches of an abandoned star system. The beacon was broadcasting a simple signal that had been designed to be detected by Council ships, but accessing its contents required technical knowledge that the search team did not possess. After weeks of careful work, Dr. Veltara managed to partially decode the beacon's message. What she found was a treasure trove of information about human activities in the months leading up to their departure. The data included shipping manifests, population counts, and resource allocation reports that painted a picture of an evacuation, so massive and well-coordinated that it defied belief. According to the beacon's records, humanity had evacuated over 2 billion people from Council space, along with industrial equipment, scientific instruments, and cultural artifacts that represented centuries of human civilization. The operation had involved thousands of ships using advanced stealth technology that made them invisible to Council sensors. Most shocking of all, the evacuation had been planned and prepared for over a decade, suggesting that humans had long anticipated their eventual rejection by the Council. They knew this would happen, Veltara reported to the Council via subspace communication. Humanity spent years preparing for the possibility that they would be forced to leave. They developed technologies and strategies that would allow them to disappear completely, taking their knowledge and capabilities with them. The beacon also contained fragments of intercepted communications that suggested humanity had established settlements in unexplored regions of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of Council ships. The messages described worlds being terraformed, using techniques that surpassed anything in Council records, cities being built with architectural principles that alien engineers could not understand, and scientific research being conducted into phenomena that Council science had not yet discovered. Most disturbing of all were references to defensive technologies that made human settlements effectively untouchable. The intercepted communications mentioned phase barriers and quantum shields that sounded like science fiction to alien researchers, but were apparently functional realities for human engineers. As the search mission continued, it became increasingly clear that finding humanity would be impossible with Council technology. The humans had not just left Council space. They had transcended it, moving beyond the reach of civilizations that they had quietly surpassed decades earlier. They had become something that the Council could no longer touch or even detect. Ambassador Kexalon stood once again on his ship's bridge, but now he was looking not at empty space where human colonies had been, but at the vast unexplored regions where humanity had presumably gone. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of Council sensors and the limits of alien understanding, human civilization was continuing to advance while the galaxy they had left behind slowly crumbled. The search mission had failed, not because humanity was hiding, but because the Council lacked the technological capability to follow them. It was like trying to track starships while possessing only wooden boats. The gap between human and alien technology had grown so wide that meaningful contact was no longer possible. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session for what many believed would be the last time. The great chamber that had once hosted representatives from dozens of star systems now accommodated barely half that number. Entire civilizations had withdrawn from galactic affairs as their infrastructure collapsed and their ability to maintain interstellar contact deteriorated. The crystal walls of Nexus Prime flickered with unstable energy, and the artificial gravity fluctuated unpredictably as the station's human-modified systems continued their slow decline toward complete failure. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the chamber where alien representatives sat in growing desperation, their usual arrogance replaced by a fear that grew stronger with each passing day. Dr. Veltara stood at the central podium, her pale blue skin reflecting the unstable lighting as she prepared to deliver what she knew would be the most important presentation of her career. In her hands, she held a data crystal containing the final piece of evidence that would force the Council to confront the magnitude of their mistake. 3 days earlier, a deep space monitoring station had detected a single human message beacon drifting in neutral space. The beacon was different from the others they had found. This one was clearly intended for the Council, broadcasting on frequencies that alien communication systems could receive. After careful analysis, Veltara had managed to decode its contents, revealing a message that would change everything. "Honored Council members," she began, her voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that indicated profound sorrow among her species. "I must report the discovery of a final communication from humanity. This message was recorded by their diplomatic representative, Sora, just before their departure from our space." The chamber fell silent as Veltara activated the holographic display. Sora's image appeared in the center of the room, her human features calm and dignified despite the momentous decision she was announcing. When she spoke, her words carried across the chamber with devastating clarity. "To the Galactic Council, by the time you receive this message, you will understand what you have lost. We were never your servants, though you insisted on seeing us that way. We were your partners, though you never recognized us as such." Thexamar shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Sora's recorded voice continued. The Vorthak leader had aged visibly over the past year, his reptilian features showing stress lines that had not been there before. His homeworld was slowly dying as its defense grid continued to degrade, and his military forces were grounded by equipment failures that his engineers could not repair. "For 50 years, we quietly held your civilization together, not because we were ordered to, but because we believed in what the galaxy could become. Every repair was an act of faith in our shared future. Every improvement was a gift freely given in the hope that someday you would see us as equals." The message continued, and with each word, the Council members sank deeper into their seats. Sora's calm recitation of human contributions painted a picture of a species that had been far more advanced than anyone had realized, quietly supporting a galactic civilization that could not have existed without their innovations. "You saw our willingness to work as proof of our subservience. You mistook our cooperation for intellectual inferiority. You interpreted our innovations as simple maintenance because you lacked the knowledge to recognize what we were actually accomplishing." Dr. Veltara paused the recording and activated a series of technical displays that showed the current state of galactic infrastructure. Red indicators dominated every chart, representing systems that had failed or were failing throughout Council space. Transportation networks were operating at 30% efficiency. Communication systems were experiencing delays measured in days rather than minutes. Life support systems on major worlds were consuming resources at unsustainable rates. The idea. Human messages accompanied by complete technical documentation of every modification they made to our systems over the past 50 years, Veltara reported. The scope of their contributions is beyond anything we previously imagined. They did not just maintain our technology, they completely rebuilt it using principles that our science has not yet discovered. She activated another display showing a comparison between original alien designs and human modifications. The differences were staggering. Where alien engineers had created functional but inefficient systems, humans had implemented elegant solutions that improved performance by orders of magnitude while using fewer resources and requiring less maintenance. Every system in Council space was dependent on human innovations that we never recognized because we assumed their work was routine repair activity. They created a technological foundation that supported our entire civilization, and we dismissed it as manual labor performed by intellectually inferior beings. Sora's recorded message resumed, her voice now carrying a note of sadness that made several council members visibly flinch. We built wonders that you could not see, solved problems you did not know existed, and prevented catastrophes that you will never know about. We did this not for recognition or reward, but because we believed it was right. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves. The recording showed images of human engineering projects that the Council had never known existed. Underground, networks that prevented seismic disasters, atmospheric processors that maintained planetary climates, communication relays that enabled instantaneous contact across vast distances. Each project represented technology that was decades ahead of standard alien capabilities. When you declared us unfit for equal treatment, you forced us to choose between our dignity and your survival. We chose dignity, as any sapient species would. We have found new stars, new worlds, new possibilities beyond your reach. We will build something better, a civilization where contribution is valued over prejudice, where innovation is recognized regardless of its source. As the message continued, Dr. Veltara presented data about humanity's current activities in unexplored space. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures in previously empty regions of the galaxy, suggesting that humans were not just surviving, but thriving in their new territory. They were building something that surpassed even their hidden achievements in Council space. The galaxy you knew is ending, but this is not our doing. You built a civilization that could only function through the invisible labor of those you deemed inferior. When you drove us away, you destroyed the foundations of your own society. The final part of Sora's message was delivered with quiet finality that left the council chamber in stunned silence. We wish you well in your remaining time among the stars. Perhaps future civilizations will learn from your mistakes and choose cooperation over domination, partnership over hierarchy. The universe is vast enough for many different forms of intelligence to flourish, if only they can learn to recognize wisdom wherever it appears. The recording ended, leaving the council members staring at empty air where Sora's image had been. The silence stretched for long minutes as alien representatives absorbed the full magnitude of what they had lost. They had not just driven away a useful labor force, they had exiled the most advanced civilization in the galaxy while remaining completely unaware of what they were doing. Dr. Veltara delivered her final report with the clinical precision that her species was known for, but her voice carried undertones of despair that made her words even more devastating. We are not victims of human betrayal or alien sabotage. We are experiencing the consequences of our own ignorance and arrogance. For 50 years, humanity served as the technological foundation of our civilization while we convinced ourselves that they were intellectually inferior beings who were useful only for manual labor. She activated one last display showing projected timelines for system failures throughout Council space. The numbers were stark and undeniable. Without human knowledge and intervention, galactic civilization would cease to exist within 5 years. Some worlds would become uninhabitable as their terraforming systems failed. Others would be isolated as communication networks collapsed. The lucky ones would simply regress to pre-industrial technology levels. Humanity could have conquered us at any time during the past 50 years. They possessed the technology, the knowledge, and the strategic position to subjugate every species in council space. Instead, they chose to work quietly in the background, holding our civilization together while we took credit for achievements that were actually theirs. Thexmar finally found his voice, though it carried none of its former authority. Is there any possibility of re-establishing contact, of convincing them to return? Veltara's response was gentle but final. Sir, our most advanced ships cannot detect human settlements even when we know where to look for them. Their technology has advanced beyond our ability to comprehend or match. They have transcended the limitations that we assumed applied to all galactic civilizations. As if to emphasize her point, the chamber's lighting flickered again, and several environmental control systems audibly cycled through emergency resets. Nexus Prime itself was dying, its human-designed improvements failing one by one as alien. Engineers proved incapable of maintaining systems they had never understood.